I'll take. Good afternoon, everybody. Grateful to have all of you here today for our installment of Beth Talks 5784. This is one of the parts of the High Holy Days that I look forward to, I think, really most each year. We are blessed now that Temple Bethel has more than 1,800 households. And one of the things that I love is that if you were to knock on the door of any of those 1,800 households, you would find amazing stories behind those doors. That even though we are a large community that comprises thousands of people from age 0 to well over 100, it's good to get to be 100 at Bethel, by the way. You get free dues. It's an incentive, right? But the people who comprise our congregation, who we walk past on Friday nights or that we see each other in religious school or preschool, even though they look like, just like us, the stories that they each have to tell are unique and powerful and extraordinary. And there is, I think, in many ways, an interesting confluence that we have this year where we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the birth of the modern state of Israel from thousands of miles away. And I constantly live with the refrain from Yehuda Halevi from 1,000 years ago, who wrote, Libi b'mizrach v'ani v'sof ha'ma'arav. My heart is in the east, but I am at the edge of the west. When he lived at the edge of the west, he was in Spain. Hardly did he know that there was an even further west in southeast Florida. And so there is this sense of how blessed and fortunate we are to live in this incredible, amazing, dynamic, marvelous Jewish community. Boca Raton in South Palm Beach County is really one of the most blessed Jewish communities in the world in terms of its diversity and its dynamic nature. And at the same time, I think there is always this little tug, whether we've been there never or if we've been there many times, towards that magnet, towards the land and the story and the state of Israel. Even when I'm just walking around and I hear someone speak a little Hebrew in the grocery store, I kind of want to go over and give them a little bit of a chibuk, a little hug like, hey, we're all mishpacha here, we're all friends. But today we're really blessed that we're going to have several members of our congregation share their very unique perspectives because their life story began in the state of Israel, and each has a unique perspective and lens on what is the state of Israel, the land from which they come, and has been part of their life story. The people that we'll hear from today will begin with Rabbi Mordechai Schreiber, who was born in Haifa and witnessed the birth of the state of Israel as a boy, and grew up in the newly born Jewish state, and then eventually made his way to the Reform Rabbinate, where he served Reform congregations in the United States and Central America. He is a master translator, has served as a national educator for BBYO in Washington, D.C., and has authored a number of books on prayer, the Bible, the Holocaust, and his own memoir in the state of Israel. We will also hear second from Lee and Izzy Rotter, who were born in Israel and raised in ultra-Orthodox families. They each left their homes and that way of life, and a few years after getting married and having their 2 children, they moved from Jerusalem here to the United States, to Boca Raton, and they will share their extraordinary journey and what they take from their upbringing in the Haredi world, and how they came to find their chosen path to Judaism here at Temple Bethel, where they have found, God willing and thankfully, a spiritual home and friends and a community. And lastly, we'll hear from Nadine Fahum, who grew up as an Arab Israeli in Haifa. And at the age, I think you had said, of 9, your mom took you over to the local tennis center and said, I think this is something you should learn. And you got kind of good at it. By the age of 11, Nadine has won Israel's national championship and held the title of Israel's #1 tennis player until the age of 18. She competed for Israel on the world stage, including in the juniors at the U.S. Open and Wimbledon. And her story, as she says, is about the unifying power of a game, a mother's vision, and the endless possibilities when we pursue what we love. And so we'll begin with Rabbi Schreiber. who is sitting in the back.
Mar Chatima Tova. May we all be chosen for life. I'm having a little problem with my vision. I don't know why. All of a sudden, it's blurry. So I'll do my best to give my talk. It's old age. I don't have to tell you. I was born in Haifa in 1939, very fateful year. My parents were young chalutzim, or pioneers, who arrived in Palestine in 1931. They were both from Poland, and they met in Haifa. They knew that the future for Jews in Europe was very precarious. And they followed the dream of becoming a free people in the ancestral land of Israel. By the way, I'm not talking in the mic. Can you hear me? When I look at the mic, it produces a lot of noise, so I'm in between. Okay. We lived not far from the Haifa harbor, in a mixed Jewish and Arab neighborhood. Before 1948, Jews and Arabs in Haifa lived peacefully. We children played together. We even went to school together. And the town had a system of rotating mayors, 1 year Arab, 1 year Jewish, and I think also British at some point. On November 29, 1947, when the UN voted to divide British mandatory Palestine / land of Israel into a Jewish state and an Arab state, our Arab neighbors rejected the plan, and hostilities broke out between the two communities. So here I was, 8 years old, caught in the middle of a local civil war, which was a prelude 4 or 5 months later, 1948, after 48, to the Declaration of Israel Independence, which led to what we call the War of Independence, and the Arabs call Nakba, the disaster. So in effect, I was growing up during 2 wars at the same time, a local civil war and a regional war in which 7 Arab neighboring countries invaded my land, and I saw it happen. They came from all sides. Invaded my land of birth from all sides. My father, who owned a truck, was drafted together with his truck and was sent to the Galilee to transport young soldiers of the new IDF to a battle in the Galilee at Nabi Yusha, a battle made famous later by the American writer James Michener in his book, The Source. My mother, to support the family, opened a small grocery store in which I was her little helper. One night, after she closed the store, we went upstairs to our apartment for the night. She sat on her bed and started to cry. I seldom saw my mother cry. When she calmed down, she told me she was afraid my father was not going to come back from the battlefield. The memory of little me trying to calm down my formidable mother, a woman in the mold of Golda Meir, has stayed with me all my life. Against all odds, little Israel survived, and so did my father. Many years have passed since those unforgettable early years of my life. But as I'm finding out now, in my mid-80s, that 80-year-old boy I once was impacted my entire life to this day. Never got over it. The birth of the State of Israel, which took place only 3 years after nearly my entire extended families in Poland became victims of Nazi atrocities, and because of which I never had the good fortune of knowing any of my grandparents, uncles, aunts, except one, any of my cousins except two, and there were many cousins. But the realization that against all odds, and they were tremendous odds, I'm still here today. At a critical moment for the future for the Jewish people, and indeed for the entire planet, this makes me realize the following. As a native Israeli, and as a dual citizen of Israel and the United States, and as a member of the entire human race, because I've been all over the world, and I consider myself a member of the human race. I have a new book coming out in that title. I and all the rest of us are facing an enormous challenge, which at this moment, my relatives and friends in Israel are doing everything within the power to overcome. We are all called upon to do what the great generations of Americans under the leadership of great presidents like Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt did in their day. Namely, make sure that, quote, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that, quote, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Those were great lessons. The birth of the State of Israel and my American experience have taught me. To me, the fate of humanity is in the hands of these two kindred nations. As Americans and as Jews, we have been given the mission of Tikkun Olam b'Malchut Shaddai, which means to repair the world in the image of the divine. Israelis are fully aware of this mission. As Americans, I skipped a section. I'm going to go back and give you another section, then I'll finish. What is truly amazing, however, about my unusual childhood is that in spite of the war that I lived through that time, or perhaps because of it, it was a very inspiring time for me, because I was being raised by amazing people, indeed heroic people. And at a very young age, I started writing poetry about this amazing land and had my first poem published in the National Children's Weekly magazine. Although life in the early years of the state was difficult, the amazing survival of the newly born state and the dynamism of our young parent generation was a source of inspiration for me and for my friends. We were people with a mission. We were the new Maccabees. And I felt deeply our kinship to the early Israelites who freed themselves from Egyptian bondage and came back to reclaim the Promised Land. We were raised by parents who were secular Zionists, but my father instilled in me a love and respect for Jewish tradition and faith. And my becoming a Reform rabbi later was a result of my lifelong love affair with the Hebrew Bible. Most of all, I've always admired the Hebrew prophets. And of the many books I've written, the one I cherish the most is my book about the prophet Jeremiah, who to me is the key prophet in all of human history. Not the big names, Jeremiah. Yes, it was a wonderful childhood. I've been truly blessed. This remarkable childhood has sustained and inspired me to this day. We Jews also need to be aware of it. This is what Israel, my Israeli childhood, taught me. Thank you very much.
Hi, Shana Tova, Gmar Tov. My name is Lee Rotter. This is my husband, Izzy. Hi. And I'm a first-generation Israeli, born to a Californian mother and a Californian father and a British mother, who, after they got married through a match, decided to make Aliyah. They also decided, among other things, that we were going to just speak Yiddish at home, and we'd eat only health food, which was very far ahead of their time, because in Israel at the time, there was hardly any health food. I think they were one of the first people to open a health food store, which didn't last very long. But my father being from California, that probably had something to do with it. After me, there were another 8 children born. We were raised in a Lubavitch Chabad family, so only girls' schools. And somewhere along the lines of my teenagehood, for various reasons, I started questioning my faith and my place in religion and what that was going to look like. One thing for sure was, to me, that I wasn't going to live the way that I was brought up. I thought it was going to look a little bit more like modern Orthodoxy. I even joined Bnei Akiva, if anyone's familiar. I went to weekly meetings, I made friends, we went on trips together. And however, when I reached 18, I realized that this wasn't for me. I felt that I didn't really believe in God, and I decided, I was going to leave it completely. What the Orthodox call, I went off the derech, or translation means off the road. And for the first year outside my home, I served in national service, which is in lieu of the army, for girls who get exemptions from the army for being religious. I had a great year, volunteered in a hospital, learned a lot from people. And a few years later, I met Izzy through mutual friends. And it was their engagement party, by the way, even though we ended up getting married first. And after we had both our kids, one day Izzy came home and said, "What do you think about moving to the States?" And I said, "You, the staunch Zionist who I floated the idea of moving to the States before we had kids, and you said no?" So we were at that point in our lives where we were living in Jerusalem, and we realized that in order for us to make a home for ourselves and for our kids, we couldn't stay there because the city is becoming increasingly more and more ultra-Orthodox. And our friends and family members who were no longer religious were basically all fleeing Jerusalem. So we started looking around the country, seeing where it might be a good fit for us, and then one day, he's like, "Let's move to the States." So I said, "You know what, the only thing I need is sunshine. I don't care where we go." And Izzy said, "It has to be somewhere Jewish." So I have a couple cousins who live here in South Florida. Izzy has some family members. We ended up here. And before we moved here, I said, I don't care if it's a Jewish area. I see it's important to you, so we'll do it. But I don't care if we're affiliated in any way, shape, or form to anything Jewish. Kind of funny because my first job here was working at the Jewish Federation. And now I work at Boca Raton Synagogue, so there goes who cares about Judaism. But it came from a place where when we lived in Israel, even if we weren't practicing or Orthodox, Judaism is just in the air. It's whether you like it or not. The national holidays are the Jewish holidays. And Judaism is just in the air. And when people celebrate anything, whether it's going to high holiday services or a bar mitzvah or any other place that they don't usually go to, whatever synagogue that is, it's the Orthodox synagogue. So actually, it was just like, I think, a year or two before we moved here that we discovered the first conservative synagogue in Jerusalem, at least the first that we knew of. And a few months before we left, we actually learned of a Reform congregation in Modi'in, which wasn't very far. But this was all really alien to us.
No, we went to the conservative ones.
We went there a couple of times, but it was kind of strange, like alien for us. It wasn't something, because we came from a place where we really didn't want to go back to, so in our minds it was kind of like an all or nothing situation. But after having moved here, after being here for like a year or two, we realized that if we want our kids to grow up as Jewish, and if we wanted some semblance of Jewish life and community for ourselves, well, I guess we have to bite the bullet and join some kind of congregation. And then we met Michelle Cohen and the Neermans. Actually, we met the Neermans before. And then some other people who kind of roped us in, and we ended up joining Temple Bethel. Izzy might be able to talk about how we went shul shopping until that happened. But I think one of the most beautiful things that I love about our rabbi and the community is, and the Jewish community at large, is how well all the rabbis get along here in Boca. I know Rabbi Down has personal relationships with the rabbis that I work with at Boca Raton Synagogue, and it's just so beautiful to see that thinking, that all or nothing thinking, is really maybe something that belonged in Israel but doesn't really belong here. And this is where we found our home, our Jewish home. And for a while there I was in the choir. Our kids go to religious school. And this is basically where we found our connection back to Judaism, which my boss still has trouble wrapping his head around. Because most Orthodox Jews that leave Orthodoxy, if and when they return to Judaism, it's not to Reform congregation. But this is where we found our place, where we enjoy sitting as a family together, praying together. We found friends. And this is basically our second home. So thank you.
So, as my wife said, my name is Izzy. I was born with the name of Israel, and my name was actually, my parents never thought about which name they're going to give me, just because the rabbi died the same year that I was born, so it immediately died. That would be my name. There was never a question about, you ask your parents, what was you ever thought about second name? There was no second name. So I was born to old Yeshuv. That's mean Jews who lived in Israel before, in the Ottoman Empire. My family came to Israel in 1777. It's people who lived there for a long time. They were very Hasidic with all the tradition and Yiddish and everything. The way you see the pictures, like the old pictures of the people in Jerusalem and Hebron, that's my family. So I grew up very, very, very Orthodox. And it was not for me. I have to be honest, there was nothing dramatic about it. It was not for me. And at the age of 16, I left yeshiva, even though I was still Orthodox. Like I put tefillin every day. I was keeping Shabbat. I was keeping kashrut. All the rules. I was just not, I didn't mind for that so much. But it never kept my mind. When I was about 20, 21 years old, I decided it's completely not for me. And when I left, I completely left. So I kind of disconnected everything from my family. People saying that your family disconnect with you. It was the opposite for me. I left everybody. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I speak Yiddish with my family. I didn't speak Yiddish to anybody. And I was really drifting away in a way I didn't care for that at all. A few years after that, somebody actually talked to me and suggested I will volunteer with people who used to be Orthodox and I'll help them. And I did it, and I went, I helped, and I volunteered. And the funny thing is that
Thank you.
my wife forget to mention that we met each other because of Yiddish, because we went to a party and with this engagement party of a friend, and I said something in Yiddish, and she looked at me and she said, how does the secular guy know how to say anything in Yiddish? So she came to speak with me in Yiddish, and we both speak Yiddish when we don't want the kids to understand what we're saying, and I hope they don't understand because it's been a long time, and I think they're starting to get it. And so for me, we were very seculars, okay? So let's say in Yom Kippur, before we had kids in Israel, we took the car, we drove to the Dead Sea and with friends and beer. We didn't mind at all. Because as you can say in Israel, as my wife said, Judaism is present. You don't have to think about it. But when we came here and we decided to move to America, when you come here, you have to define what makes you Jewish. It's the first place that the first time in my life that I had to challenge what does it mean for me to be Jewish. Because in Israel, everybody's Jewish. My neighbor is Jewish, the other guy, the one across the street, the one I'm going to work with, it's very defined. If they're not Jewish, they're Arabs, and there is the conflict, and everybody knows where they are, and everybody knows. But here you have neighbors, and you have a life, and you have, and you live, and you go to school, and your kids go to school, and you have to define what it is to be Jewish. And the first time I was challenged. I was really challenged about what is it to be Jewish. And things changed for me. So, for example, I don't believe in God. I'm sorry. I know maybe it's insulting for other people. It's just, it's like, okay, I can say I believe in God, but I don't think there is one. So it's like, it doesn't work for me. But since I am in the States, I fast on Yom Kippur. That's the only place. Since I came here in Israel, after I was frum, I was fasting, of course, but then I didn't. But since I'm in the U.S., I'm fasting on Yom Kippur. It's important for me. We don't eat pork in the house. Like people ask me why. And yes, I was looking for a community. It was very difficult for me. You have to understand that the way we were grew up, reform is the worst. It's like, become Christian is not as bad. Just don't become reformed. That's gonna be like, until now, when I go to visit my family and I see my uncles and my aunt, I don't even mention that I am a member of a reform community because they're gonna look at me like, oh my God, you're the devil. So, like, you stop being religious, that's fine. Join reform, that's a different league. But we joined this, and there is a community, and I do feel I miss the songs, the what we call nigun. I come from a Hasidic background. It's very important for me. So I do go to the Orthodox synagogue once in a while to hear a nigun, and I also went last night to hear a nigun. I went to the prayer to hear Kol Nidre, an Orthodox. My wife came here, and I was there. I was very happy, and as you can hear, my first language is not English, it's Hebrew. And I was holding Machzor, it's Machzor, the book of the praise of Yom Kippur. And it's one page in Hebrew and one page in English. And sometimes I like to see how to translate something. And I came across a very, very nice thing that I thought it would be very suitable for this specific talk. So there is a very famous pray on Yom Kippur. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's basically saying, "Oh, dear God, please forgive us, because we are your nation and you are our God. We are your sons and you are our father. We are your servant and you are our master." And this is the next one, because in Hebrew it says, I'll say it in Hebrew even though you don't understand, but it'll translate. It says, "Anu ke'alecha v'ata chelkenu." So I looked at the translation to English, and he says, "Because we are your congregation and you are a portion." I didn't understand it. I said, what does it mean? So I look on the bottom of the thing, and I said, portion says that you are a part. Some nations chase money, some nations chase glory. We chase you, you are a portion. But I don't feel that's the right translation. I felt that it's a wrong translation. It just doesn't fit right. For me, it's you are a congregation, we are your congregation, and you are part of us. Chilkenu, part of us. Right? You are part of us. I think this is the right translation. And then I realized something, in that moment it hit me, and the point is saying that somebody can be individual and saying, okay, I believe in God or don't believe in God. It doesn't make a difference. But the God in a Jewish, I think, the way I see Jewish, is when I said it, I don't think there is a Jewish, but you can believe it. It's what unites us as a nation, what we are. And then we have to be a congregation. You cannot be not a congregation and saying that you are with us. No, if you're not a part of the congregation, then you're not part of us. To be part of us, or part of Judaism, it's got to be in a congregation. You have to be a part of a group. You have to be, otherwise it just doesn't work. And I'm glad I realized it, 5 years ago when we joined this temple? And it was extremely difficult for me. And I can tell you, the first times I came to this one, we had a long conversation after that. When we came back home, it was extremely strange for us. And until now, there's things I cannot do. Like when you do when they go to the church to pray, I cannot. I'm sorry, there gotta be, but it's fine. But I can accept it, that there's a congregation that I cannot. Some things I like, some things I don't like. But if you're not part of the congregation, that you're not part of us. It's got to be together. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So when I was thinking, where do I start this talk? What part of my life would be, the most relevant? I realized I want to start today, because today, 34 years ago, I was born on Yom Kippur. Yeah. That's my Hebrew birthday. I was born in Haifa to an Arab Muslim family. And the first time I really had to think about what that actually meant was when my parents were deciding which school to send me to. So to give you a little bit of background, when I was a kid, and until now as well, schools for the most part are not mixed. So the Arab kids go to the Arabic schools, and the Jewish kids go to the Hebrew school. But when my mom had her eyes set on a prestigious Hebrew school, she had to face a lot of backlash and questioning from our friends and family. And despite that, she still chose to send us to the Hebrew school, the Reality Hebrew School in Haifa. This decision was not easy for my family, but I can say that this decision has shaped my life in a very, very special way. My little brother and I, he's a year and a half younger than me, Fahum, we were the only non-Jewish kids at the school. And to ensure that we integrated well, my parents decided that they will only speak Hebrew to us at home. They tried to reverse this policy a few years later, but the ship has sailed. And funny enough, I loved school. I had friends at school. I had fun. And funny enough, my favorite subject at school was Torah. I used to get A's all the time, and my second grade teacher used to call me Harabanit. I was very flattered, which meant female rabbi in Hebrew. So on a day-to-day, I felt like the other kids. My background, my religion wouldn't come up. It would only come up, and I would be reminded of who I was when the tensions at the border with Palestine would intensify. And then I would hear things from death to the Arabs, you are a terrorist. I was even was asked to choose a side when nobody else was asked to choose a side. So I was like, okay, why do I have to choose a side? And for the record, my side was always just peace and freedom and opportunity for everyone, no matter Arab, Jewish, anybody. And when things got really bad, my mom would raise it to the school, and those kids would be punished or be told, go do their homework and come back and explain why this was wrong, what they did. But each time just left a mark. My mom's dream was to play tennis, but after her parents lost everything in the 48 war, which was the War of Independence of Israel, they couldn't afford it. And being the youngest out of 12 siblings, they told her that, and all of them, that they should focus on school. They felt like school was the only way to make a better life for themselves and to integrate in society and have a better future. But this dream never left my mom's heart. And when she could afford it later on in life and only had 2 kids, she sent my brother and I to the Haifa Tennis Center. I was 9 years old, like Rabbi Dan said. My brother was 7.5. And I don't think she had any expectations for us going in, but very, very quickly we fell in love with the game. We fell in love with the game, with the atmosphere. We were obsessed. We would practice 2 months later. We would practice every day after school, against the wall, at home when my parents weren't watching. I did break a few lamps. And I just felt that, even though my brother and I were the only non-Jewish kids at the tennis center as well, that here, at the tennis center, it became a second home. Like that was this place where all the labels, Muslim, Arab, Hebrew school student, all these labels just didn't apply. When I stepped on court, I was Nadine, the tennis player. And my mom saw, how much fun we were having and how tennis really gave us purpose, passion, and common ground with our Jewish friends, that she thought, more kids should benefit from that. And one day after practice, she went to the manager's office, and she said, maybe you guys should go to Arab schools and recruit more Arab kids to come play tennis. I think it's a great environment for all of them to integrate, to just play and be kids and learn to love each other rather than fear each other. He loved the idea. He was very supportive, and together with a few coaches, they started going to Arabic schools and advertising the program. And only 2 months later, we had this coexistence program where we all played doubles together and had fun. And I'm sure at the time for the adults, it was very emotional and meant a lot. But for us, we were just kids being kids. We were just having a fun tennis day. And I continued to practice very hard. And like Rabbi Dan said, when I was 12, I won my first national championship and was ranked #1 in Israel. And I held this title until I was 18. And I had the honor of representing Israel in European championships, world championships, Wimbledon, and US Open juniors. Thank you. My brother and I were the first and only Arab kids on the national teams. But it wasn't always so easy. When I was 15, I was set to go represent Israel in the Youth Olympics. I was ecstatic. It was my biggest dream. I couldn't believe it. And I was so happy. And after a few sleepless nights, eventually the day arrived, and we all went with the family to the airport. I was wearing the team gear with the Israeli flag on one side, the Olympic sign on the other side. And I get there, I see the team, we all chit-chat, having fun, and I was just on top of the world. And eventually it was time to get to the gate and, take the flight so we can compete. I arrived at security, everyone stood at security line, and eventually it was my turn. The security personnel from El Al came up to me, and after, a fun chit-chat, asked for my passport, so I gave it to him. And, obviously, as an Arab, Muslim, Israeli, I've had my fair share of humiliating airport security experiences. But this time, I knew it was going to be different because I was on the Olympic team. Then he opened my passport, saw my name, and his face changed. He said, "Okay, can you please wait here a few minutes, separate from the team?" And that's it. He left. And, I remember since I was 9 years old, I was getting pulled aside, so I knew the drill. But everyone else on the team was shocked. Why was it happening? But a little bit also aware of why this was happening. Just very angry and felt, bad for me. So he came back with 5 other security personnel and started questioning every part of my identity. They asked me, "What are your parents' names?" I said, Anan and Wafa. I thought to myself, they didn't expect David or Jennifer, right? Like, and then he asked, what school do you go to? And I said, the Reali Hebrew School. In perfect Hebrew, no accent. I was proud. It was one of the top schools in Israel. I thought that would give me a freebie. And he kept going, why is your Hebrew so good? And I said, as if that was something bad, as if I was planning to do something bad with it. Not because I was ashamed to speak Arabic to my family growing up, because I wanted to fit in. And they kept going and going and going, and eventually, of course, they let me go. But that was it. That was my reminder that I was different, even with the flag on my chest. My mom, who was standing there and watching this unfold, she couldn't stay quiet. My mom, she's a fighter, she's a lawyer, she's really made a name for herself, and she did not stay quiet. She threatened to sue and eventually sued. We had the support. I mean, everyone was, on the team was shocked. The principal of my high school, who was the ex-spokesman of the army, was also appalled. And and today my mom is frequently invited actually to give lectures to allied security guards on how to treat minorities. We also want to be safe. I think airport security is very important. I like that, but I don't want to be humiliated in the process. In 11th grade, at school, all my friends got invitations to enlist in the army. It's something that they all get, 11th grade. And it was it felt a little bit awkward for me, because on the one hand, I felt like an outcast again, this longing to fit in. That's all that everyone talked about the senior year. It's like what unit they were going to go to, where they're going to serve, how they're preparing, and how the doors that prestigious units would open for them in the future. Great universities, jobs, lifelong friendships, everything that I was going to miss out on. And on the other hand, I felt this deep sense of relief as well, not having to see myself in an IDF uniform, standing, me, Nadine Fahum, Arab, Muslim, Israeli, Palestinian citizen of Israel, sitting there, looking down at somebody who could potentially be my blood relative at the border security, who would also, by the way, view me as a traitor for being Israeli. So I was kind of free to go figure it out. And so when I graduated high school, I received a tennis scholarship to the US, and I went to Old Dominion University in Virginia. And after beating the #1 ranked girl in Division I tennis, I ended up transferring to Duke University, where I played #1 singles and doubles for the 3rd ranked team in the nation. For me, coming to America was an opportunity to shed all the labels, just leave all the politics and the drama behind. I was fresh, new, in the land of opportunity, and I wanted to make the most out of it. But somehow, here in the US, I was actually able to turn things around and use this background as something positive, as a strength, not something to run away from. So when the American dream actually wasn't as easy as advertised. But I had my fair share, and I'll spare you, of struggles with visas and work opportunities and all of that. But being Arab Israeli really made me resilient and gave me loads of chutzpah. And so when I graduated college, I took the Greyhound bus to New York City, the city of opportunity in the land of opportunity, I felt. And in the pursuit of what I recently discovered was the actual American dream work on Wall Street. So a few years later, with a lot of, struggle, I actually started working in finance. I worked at a hedge fund in New York City, and a few years later, I moved to San Francisco and started working on high-impact investment firm. And somehow throughout all of this journey, I found myself constantly surrounded by Israeli and Jewish friends, and some Arabs as well, who made the US a home. Somehow here, there was no difference, especially with my Hebrew, just immediately connected, and we're siblings. But despite all of this, I had one boundary. I promised myself when I came to the US that no matter what, I will not date anyone Jewish or Muslim. I was done. I felt like neither could fully understand me and where I come from. But I matured. I was already growing up. I was working. I was a person. I graduated. I felt like, okay, why not? If somebody came up to me and they were a good person, I'll take a look. And so one day, my friend in San Francisco told me that this guy, Sasha, who I thought was very cute, that he has a Turkish background. So I said, oh, wow, okay, a Muslim guy. I'm sure my parents would be happy. And turns out, my other friend told Sasha that Nadine is from Israel. So he thought, oh, a Jewish girl. Finally, my parents will be happy. So our friends' lack of attention to detail got us to City Hall 9 months later in San Francisco. Yeah. Thank you. I did not expect to cry here. Yeah, people usually ask, right? People are curious, like, how do you get along? Like, what is it like, a Muslim dating a Jewish guy? Like, where are the conflicts? And in some ways, surprisingly, I feel like we're extremely similar, right? Both of our grandparents went through the tragedies of war, loss, pain, the fight to survive, and try to create a better life for their families. We come from backgrounds where our families viewed education as the ultimate tool to success. And we were both minorities in our country. So Sasha is from Belgium. He was a Jewish kid growing up in Belgium. So we're both minorities in our own countries, and we really try to adapt to fit in, even sometimes at the cost of a little bit hiding who we were. So we really do try to celebrate our differences. Also, I told Sasha that I'm his ChatGPT for Jewish holidays, because I'm so familiar with that. So, we do try to celebrate our differences, even though they really, I feel like there aren't many. Today, we're raising 2 kids. Liam is 2.5 years old, and Maya, 9 months old tomorrow. And both go to Bethel. That's not my yacht. Yeah, they both go to Bethel, and always this decision to send them to. Also, people ask, like, how is it? How are you going to raise your kids, right? So, I think we really want them to understand their patchwork of backgrounds and learn about it, but learning cultures doesn't stop at understanding their own. After all, our family is shaped by the dichotomy of the Holocaust, the independence of Israel, and the Nakba, like the rabbi said, which is what the Palestinians call the catastrophe. That's how they view the events that happened to them that day. I was born to a Muslim family. I went to Hebrew school, and my mom would take us to church on the weekend. And when I asked why, she said, because I love it. I feel relaxed. God is one for all of us. No matter your religion, no matter where you are, wherever you worship, there is one God. And Sasha was born in a Jewish family. He went to a Jewish school in Belgium, and he would celebrate Christmas and Easter because his grandmother was hidden in a Christian family during the Holocaust. So we want to expose them to all cultures. We want them to see the beauty in each religion, ethnicity, or individual, to see the common human pain and also the human need, the celebration. We want them really to grow into a generation that can connect beyond their differences and that really builds bridges rather than walls. And today it's much easier decision, like I said, to send them to Bethel, much easier than my parents had to make back 30 years ago. And we do feel that Bethel is family to us, And 9 months ago, when I gave birth to our daughter Maya, I had some complications, and on the third ER visit, in days after delivery, the only person I thought about calling was Rabbi Dan, and he was, so extremely helpful and supportive emotionally, and by connecting us to the right people, with the right doctors. We were new in Florida, so we didn't know many people. And I did think to myself, do people at the school know that I'm not Jewish? Does Rabbi Dan know that I'm Muslim? What if they found out? Not out of fear, but more out of curiosity. And of course, later, when we met with Rabbi Dan, we had a great conversation. And at the end of the conversation, he asked me to speak here in front of you today, and I was extremely flattered and nervous. And I figured the best way out is through. So even though I'm from Israel, I speak Hebrew, I'm married to a Jewish guy, I send my kids to a Jewish school, I work in finance, and I live in Boca Raton. Now you all know that I'm not Jewish. Thank you. And I know that Yom Kippur is about slichot, it's about reflection and connection. So let's use this day to truly see one another and bridge our stories. Shana Tova and Gmar Chatima Tova. Thank you all.
Again, let's please show our appreciation for our 4 wonderful speakers today. A reminder that our afternoon service will begin with our Martyrology and Yizkor services in the Singer Sanctuary at 3:45 today. If you want to see recordings of our Bethel talks, they'll be available on the website after the holiday, and we wish everybody that we should be sealed for goodness. Gemar Chatima Tova.